Hi everyone, welcome to Open Applied Linguistics Reading Club Meet the Author series. It's our great honor today to have Dr. David Resnik to join us to talk about AI disclosure in research. When should it be mandatory, optional, or unnecessary? It's based on an article published this year on accountability in research. Dr. David Resnik is a bioethicist at National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, National Institutes of Health in the US. Dr. Resnik has an MA and PhD in philosophy from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and JD from Concord University School of Law. He received his BA in philosophy from Davidson College. Dr. Resnik was an associate and full professor of medical humanities at the Brody School of Medicine at East Carolina University from 1998 to 2004, and associate director of the Bioethics Center at East Carolina University and University Health Systems from 1998 to 2004. Dr. Resnik was assistant and associate professor of philosophy at the University of Wyoming from 1990 to 1998 and director of the Center for the Advancement of Ethics at the same university from 1995 to 1998. Dr. Resnik has published over 250 peer-reviewed articles and 10 books on various topics in philosophy and bioethics, and is a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. He serves on several editorial boards and is an associate editor of the journal Accountability in Research. Dr. Resnik was chair of the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences Institutional Review Board, IRB, from 2008 to 2019, and is a certified IRB profession. Thank you so much, David, for joining us today.
You're welcome.
So the agenda is that we have prepared some questions in advance to get everybody to remind everybody of the content of the article, but that followed by that will be a free Q&A. So please think about your questions in mind and maybe type in the chat, or if you want later, you can open your mic. So, David, could you briefly introduce the article again, the aim and the purpose, or what motivated you to write it?
Sure. So this is just a little bit of background. So when uh, large language models like ChatGPT were, first used, a lot in scientific writing, let's say they first actually appeared as authors. They were named as authors in some publications in late 2022 and early 2023. There was, a lot of discussion about what to do about this, and the uh, consensus view among a lot of ethics people and journal editors was that AI could not be an author, but AI use to help in writing had to be disclosed. And so a lot of journals moved to that position. But then it started to become clear, especially when I was doing teaching on this topic at our institute. People were like, well, hold it. AI is incorporated into my browser. My Google browser uses AI. Do I have to disclose that? And Grammarly and even Word and other word processing programs that I'm using are using AI, have AI incorporated, and I might be using AI just to do some editing. So it became clear that AI was getting more and more incorporated into the research workflow in many ways. And it was not practical useful in any way to disclose all those uses of AI. So then it's like, okay, well, we have to draw a line somewhere then. There needs to be some kind of line for where disclosure should be. And um, we settled on, me and Muhammad and I went in writing this piece, and this is actually the same guidance now that we use at the National Institutes of Health based on this, is substantial use. Okay, so what is substantial use? Well, that is a use that affects the content of what you're doing, the research output or the article. So some examples would be using AI in data analysis. Obviously, everybody agrees that if you use AI that way, it should be disclosed, just like any use of any other research tool, like a statistics package or something. Then also to generate content, generate text or images that are used, or to substantially edit with AI or translate with AI. Also, we figured that AI could be used to make certain research decisions, which were not really data analysis. So, decisions like data extraction for a systematic review or something like that. And then we said, well, there's some things that are not substantial uses that don't need to be disclosed, like using AI to do some background research for an article, just like you would do a Google search or PubMed search or something, or using AI to do just minor editing for you, clean up the language, check for grammar, things like that. Maybe using AI to suggest some words, or help improve your word choice, things like that. Um, and we said that those kinds of uses would be they wouldn't mandatory. The disclosure wouldn't be mandatory, but it could be optional, depending on the situation. But it might not even be recommended because it might just be distracting to the reader to have all this disclosure. So it takes a lot of time for you as a researcher to do all this disclosure. You end up keeping more records of disclosure than you're actually doing work, and then distracting for the reader because it's not really important for what the article is about. Let's see, what else am I trying to think? Okay, so and also in framing this whole in developing this framework, we took a step back from the whole process of disclosure and said, well, what is the point of disclosure? Why are we disclosing in the first place, right? And there's the obvious thing that you want to be transparent and open about your research, right? So that's an important thing. You also want to promote fair sharing of credit, give credit where credit is due, but in this case, like not taking more credit than you deserve. So, like if AI did a lot of work for you, you should be saying that that's what happened, so you won't be taking more credit than you deserve. Also, another important thing, not so much with writing, although perhaps, but certainly with data analysis, is for reproducibility. That if people want to reproduce um, your analysis of the data using some kind of AI model, they need to know what the system was you used, the version number, the date, a lot of information that you would disclose then. So that's sort of the thing we came up with. I think another thing that's become apparent to me too, and I think this was one of the discussion in one of the questions that was asked was sort of the importance of normalizing the process of disclosure in the research community. So there is a thing like AI shame, or people that feel ashamed to disclose AI use because people might think that they're cheating, or that their language is not very, their writing ability is not very good, especially in English, if that's what has to be, the article has to be in. So people are embarrassed, shameful. And I think, I've been talking to audiences at our institute about this problem, and I think that that's not a good reason, and we need to overcome that thing, and just accept that AI is with us, and we have to just be open about it, and not make people feel ashamed to disclose it. You should be disclosing it like you would disclose anything else, like your materials and methods, or if you have funding support or outside interests of some kind, conflicting interests. All these things should be disclosed. Um, so I guess that's where I am with it right now. It's a moving target. Um, I think there may be different disciplines may have different um, attitudes and policies toward it. So I could think like in the humanities, for example, where uh, the exact wording or language is very important, much more so than in, say, computer science or some of the more, hard sciences. Uh, then they might require more disclosure. Like if I used an important word in my English paper or my philosophy paper, and the word actually came from an AI model suggesting it to me, maybe I should disclose that in the same way I would maybe disclose that a graduate student had suggested that word to me, or something like that. Whereas I don't think it would matter that much in, say, uh, a paper in computer science, or physics or mathematics, where language, the I don't know, the richness or the of the language is not all that important. It's really just getting across factual information. Um, so I guess I'll stop there, and I'll take and we can have more discussion.
Thank you so much, David. I love how you talk about how the policies and people's attitude have been changing from the beginning. People always said, okay, no AI as authors, and then, but this seems clear cut. But what about other issues? And there will be questions from students, from researchers about that, and uh, and of course, this policy could be domain specific, and different domains will have different, nuanced understanding of how disclosures should be implemented. And in your article, you mentioned that there are actually varying policies among the publishers, like Springer and Taylor Francis. Because when
Yeah.
we submit an article to a journal, we need to look at the publisher's policy. And do you foresee a global standard for disclosure, or will you see that journals and publishers will still maintain some flexibility or even conflicts?
Well, I don't know. Can I share a slide?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, let me see if I can share this slide. Oh, you got to allow screen sharing.
Yes, I've just made you a co-host. I think that will give you access for screen sharing.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to go to full screen because Can you see this slide?
Yes.
Okay. So just a little thing I put together just sort of shows some variation we're seeing right now. Whoops. This is this. So these are different publishers and journals. And everybody agrees, if you look at on the right side, everybody agrees the human being has to be responsible. And everybody agrees now that there's no AI authors. But there's some differences about disclosure. So you have Elsevier, yes, you can use AI, but disclosure, yes, but not for editing. Oxford, disclosure. And then what we're actually seeing now is some journals are not allowing you to use AI at all for images. Um, and then you see over here, you have, yeah, Springer, you need to disclose, yes, but not for editing. Um, Here you have Lancet saying that you can use AI, but only for editing. So you can see some variation right in this column, at least, about using AI and about disclosing AI, where we are seeing that variation. So what do I think is going to happen? Well, I think uh, I think a lot of this is going to be driven by the publishers. And the publishers' worries about legal liability, in particular, copyright violation. So I think that's what's driven uh, the policies that I showed you up there, where they said you cannot use AI to generate images that are published. And the one reason for that, of course, and I've written on this, is that the problem of fake images, right? And that's going to be a very big problem. It's getting worse and worse. But from the publisher's perspective, they don't care about fake images. They care more that the images might be violating copyright in some way, and they might get sued. And we've seen, as you know, we've seen these lawsuits in the United States. I don't know if other countries have copyright lawsuits with generative AI, but they're winding their way through the courts, and there have been some settlements of these lawsuits. So I think that's going to drive some policy too. But I do think there will eventually be we will settle down and have more uniform understanding, because if you look at other policies like well, let's say authorship policies, okay, you have the ICMJE, which is very influential. All the biomedical journals and a lot of other journals follow it. You have the World Medical Association, which isn't very different. I think we have the authorship standards around the world are very similar. There's not that much variation. And we're starting to see some settling down when it comes to disclosure of other things like funding and conflict of interest. So I guess I'm optimistic. I think we will eventually see more consensus on this.
Thank you so much for your insights. And following on that about the whole publishing process, I want to ask a question about the reviewers. So I've seen articles saying that disclosing AI use will, make the reviewer have negative attitudes towards that paper. So in case of optional disclosure, how do you think we should balance transparency with potential reviewer bias? Can we do something about it, or is we still need to disclose as best as we can?
I still think we should disclose, and the reviewers should just get educated and learn to get over their bias, right? Because, for instance, um, if you're a reviewer and someone did not disclose, and you
Mm,
strongly suspect that the paper has been written by AI, or a lot of it, whatever, a lot of AI work has been done on it, but it's not been disclosed, you're going to be even more biased against the paper, I think, because you're going to think the author is not being honest in some way, or they're lacking integrity. So I think it's really the best thing. I've seen some papers come out now from like people who are not English speakers that have been submitted, and they have disclosed AI use. And the AI has really improved the quality of their writing. It's not been a bad thing and these are papers that years ago, if you had a non-English speaker trying to write English, and the paper comes in and it's poorly written, you would have been biased against it because of the quality of the English, or you might have said, "We need to send this paper back. You need to go get somebody to help you, with your English before we can consider this submission." Um, So again, I think normalizing disclosure for everybody involved, for the disclosing during the peer review process, after publication, all that, I think is really the best policy going forward.
Yeah. And I expect the whole system, involving publisher and reviewer and researchers will just get hopefully more standardized and people will have a consensus on AI disclosure. And I have one last question. So people online, please prepare your questions and um, thinking about the educating future researchers, do you think AI disclosure ethics should be formally taught in research training, or how much, to what extent do you see this is AI disclosure ethics is a commonly taught uh, component in research training already? And do you have any core principles you recommend will you recommend including?
Well, I do recommend that it be taught in research ethics classes or research methods classes somewhere, writing classes. We've started teaching it at the NIH. The last couple of years, we've been emphasizing it for our trainees and having discussions on it. So I think it will become a part of the standard practice of teaching in responsible conduct of research. So in responsible conduct of research, we already teach things like authorship and issues around publication and peer review and reproducibility and data sharing and things like that. And I think the use of AI in various ways will just become a part of that teaching and that discussion. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, David, for answering our questions. And because our audience they are at different career stages and they may have different roles as editors or reviewers or authors. Let's see. Anybody have any questions for David?
Yeah, while people are thinking about their questions, maybe I'll just ask. Oh, Luke, do you want to ask a question?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much for setting this up. I'm super fascinated by this conversation. I think a lot about research ethics and about the sort of author side as well as the kind of editorial side and researcher training and those kinds of things. Um, I have a really just a I'm all the things you're talking about, David. I'm thinking about also, but I don't have answers to a lot of the questions. I have one that's just really kind of practical and um, very sort of tactical in a way. I like the idea of, I love the idea of disclosure, of kind of normalizing it because I would much rather know as a reader or as a reviewer, as an editor, I'd much rather know what authors are doing than not know. and then we can assess, where it falls on kind of the spectrum, or we can disagree, or we can discuss where different practices fall on the spectrum of appropriateness. I don't I don't really like the idea of just sort of I think I totally agree with the idea of like pushing back on the idea that things are just, AI is categorically right or wrong. I think we have to sort of live in the gray area, sort of live in this tension space between those. So one of my questions is, where in the submission, review, publication pipeline do you think it's most appropriate for disclosure to happen? And probably in multiple points, but do you see it as like a document submitted with each manuscript, or do you see a series of checkboxes or like text boxes that are filled in by authors? Yeah, where do you see that happening?
That's a good question. I mean, so I think it should happen right at the submission process, very beginning, and then also later. So if you look at, say, other disclosures, in papers, you go to the funding disclosure section, you go to the conflict of interest section, you look at the materials and methods. Um, um, so yeah, I think it should be throughout the process.
So upon submission, and then do you think that the information, like let's say somebody used that AI, and I like what you set up as like things that are not I like substantial, although lots of room for interpretation there, but like let's say an author used AI for idea generation or for like background literature search, right? Okay, maybe that's not necessary to include, but the things that they decide that should be included, do you envision that as being like mentioned? Let's say somebody used AI to help with their code for analysis, for example, and let's say to debug their code. And I'm not saying should that or shouldn't that be disclosed, but would that appear then in the method section, or do you envision like a separate little section along with like maybe the acknowledgments or the credit statement? Another one of the, almost like the authorship acknowledgement section of
Yeah,
the.
so I think it could be in different parts of the paper, depending on how you do it. So I reviewed a paper recently where they did a systematic review, and then they used a AI model, Chat GPT, to check their results. They they fed all the PDFs of the papers into the Chat GPT, and they saw what Chat GPT came up with, sort of a check on their results, and they discussed this thoroughly in the methods section.
Okay.
And that seems to be the place, because
Well, that
the
was a big part
AI,
of their method. Yeah, that was
that's
a big
their method, right?
yeah.
And you can imagine a lot of other papers, like, doing genomic analysis with AI and other things where this is like woven into your method. But then if it were just, you know, I used AI, maybe this paper was I used AI to translate this paper from Chinese or something, right?
Right.
That would maybe be in the acknowledgments section. I think might be a better place for it than the method. So again, I think a lot of this will depend on the discipline you're in and where they think it's appropriate for the disclosure to occur. Um, some have suggested a separate AI disclosure section in the paper, like you just have, but maybe, but again, if AI is like part of your method, it seems like it has to be there at least.
Yeah. Yeah, like that in the description, because it's probably part of describing how how the process by which you arrived at your data and your findings and your conclusions. Um,
Right.
Maybe I would maybe also, now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, like to see it also appear maybe in sort of that like front matter of the article, along with conflicts of interest or funding statement or acknowledgments. Just as
Yeah.
like a quick, but not like a big prose description, almost like the credit statement or other sort of author attribution statements that just say like it was used. You could just have like maybe major sections of the paper, major points in the research cycle process, and there's just like a little checkbox or something.
Yeah, I think that, again, I go back to the purpose of disclosure, right? And if the purpose is just kind of like being honest and open and transparent and giving credit where it's due, then maybe a little statement is enough. It covers your bases. But when the purpose is reproducibility, that's a whole different ballgame, right? And that's where you have to get into the nuances of how you use the AI, all these
Right.
things like, the prompts and the version and, the whole prompting process and what you did, what you got, so that if it's part, it is producing your results, then someone could, reproduce it, you know.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. I'm sorry to take so much time here, you guys. But I like that. I really like the table that shows the variability across different publishers. My impression, if I can say, is that I don't think that the best guidance is going to come from the publishers. I totally agree, David, with what you said, they're mostly just looking for liability and legal protection in the same way that the author guidelines for methodological transparency that we get from publishers are usually very generic. I think the best stuff comes from the actual learned societies or the journals themselves, or the sort of editorial, the academic side of the publishers, not from the commercial or corporate side of the publishers.
I agree. And if you actually look at a lot of journal publisher policies, they often cut and paste from other people's policies. I've seen that
Totally.
already. I mean,
Or they farm out to like the COPE guidelines or whatever, which I think is fine. I would prefer that than rather
yeah,
see somebody on the legal team of Wiley write up, guidelines for
yeah,
us.
this is what you got to do.
Yeah,
But unfortunately, they are, they are publishing stuff. They control publication, really. I mean, they're paying
yeah.
for it. It's a business, right?
It is, but
Um,
in the same way that though, I think we all know that IRB approval doesn't mean that a study is ethical, right? Or that it
yeah.
was handled and reported ethically. I think that's just like the first meeting the requirements of like the publisher requirements. That to me, that's just like the very first step of like ticking the boxes, and that doesn't ensure that the study is being carried out in a transparent, fully disclosed manner.
Well, yeah,
But yeah,
and I'm not sure what would happen if someone submitted a paper that met, uh, let's say, the ICMJE requirements, but not the publisher's requirements, right?
right.
And and so the publisher didn't even check, and I suspect they probably don't a lot of times, and so um, the paper could get published. So maybe it wouldn't be a big deal. But then if there were a lawsuit,
Mm,
that's when the publisher could say, oh, well, they didn't meet our requirements, so their lawsuit is void, right? They screwed up,
right.
or someone we can retract or whatever because you didn't meet you violated our requirements.
Right. Or if
But
somebody's going to get sued, maybe the publisher would say it should be the author, not us.
yeah,
Yeah.
right, exactly. So it might just be a way, like so many things, of them trying to avoid legal liability.
Right.
Um,
Hey, I'll just throw into the chat here really quick. This is more for like the applied linguistics community, but although David, you may want to check it out too. This is a examination of artificial intelligence guidelines in applied linguistics journals. So this paper is just out. This is Yin and Chappelle 2025, I think, just for folks in our field, or you, David. But they kind of looked at 170 journals in applied linguistics, which is our discipline, to look at what the different policies were, and they vary, as you'd imagine, very extremely widely,
mhm.
and across 50 or 80 different dimensions or practices or techniques.
I'll
Anyway,
take a look at that.
I'll stop there, but I just appreciate what you guys are all doing here. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I also have some questions if the audience is not asking any. So actually, I have two questions. The first one is a very interesting argument that I've heard from other people, like saying like a lot of the reactions to AI right now is similar to the reactions that people had to calculators when they were first invented. I'm sure you've heard of some version of it, perhaps. And I just wonder like what your thoughts are regarding that. Do you see the resemblance between the two situations, or there are some fundamental differences between them? So that's the first question.
Well, I think there are fundamental differences. Um, a calculator can add up one and two for you or multiply numbers, but it doesn't change the rules of math. It doesn't really affect the content of what you're doing so much, whereas AI can, right? And it can make up stuff. We know that. The whole hallucination problem is a serious problem that's not going away. Um, so yeah, I think it much more fundamentally affects the output than a calculator does. Um,
Yeah, okay. So that question might be related to my second question. Again, this one perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I find the topic extremely interesting, which is AI authorship, right? I know right now is like the consensus, like nobody thinks AI should be an author, but I'm just curious to see what you think looking to the future, maybe in 5, 10 years, or even, I don't know, 20, 30 years time. What do you see is going to happen? And also, I've heard like, I think like a few months ago in computer science, there was a conference where that was completely focused on AI, using AI agents, and only AI is allowed to be authors. I haven't been following up on the latest development, but I think people are looking into that area. And I'm just curious to see what you think. I know we can't predict the future, but yeah, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts.
well, I think I guess I would maintain a firm line on authorship that until AI becomes a moral agent, that it should not be an author, it should not be a copyright holder, it should not have any legal or moral rights until we are really, really ready to recognize that. Um, I think authorship is that it's two sides of a coin. There's credit, but there's also accountability. So if someone is an author, that they're responsible for the content, and they can face legal or moral repercussions for what they write, right? Uh, Currently, AI cannot do that, right? I mean, AI can't even tell you honestly how it arrived at the conclusions it did. I mean, I know we have, language of thought models and chain of reasoning and things like that, but actually large language, that's not actually how large language models arrive at the output they create, right? The output is still a black box, and if the AI tells you it was following certain steps, that's just a post hoc rationalization and often a lie. So you can't do that, and um, you can't punish AI. Can you imagine putting an AI model in jail, or shaming it, or you know killing it? I mean, you can't really punish AI like you can punish a person. So I just don't think they're there. AI is there yet. But having said that, you know, people are working on, artificial general intelligence, who knows what that'll do, and trying to, a machine consciousness and things like that. So I could envision a future where AI may be a very different AI than what we have now, not just the large language models, but something maybe embodied, if you will, um, can become a moral agent and participate in moral communities, like being an author and a reviewer, and really responsible for things, but not now. But maybe I'm just an old stick in the mud, and maybe notions of AI authorship will evolve, and a few years from now, people say you're just old fashioned, and that's you know, stupid, just let AI be an author. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, but it's like I don't know. There is like on some days I feel like yeah, that's exactly like you say, but on other days I don't know. Who knows? How based on the the current speed of development of AI, I don't know what's it gonna look like in a maybe the somewhat distant future, perhaps. Yeah, we might see a completely different, that would be a completely different story, I guess.
Great. Yeah, Cindy, I have a question.
Hi, thank you so much, Dr. Resnick, for the introduction of your paper. I really enjoyed the discussion too. And while I was listening to all of your points, I was thinking about uh, more from a pedagogical perspective. So I teach my research interest is in language policy, and I teach undergraduate students composition classes. I'm in a language department, and I was wondering, from an educational perspective, whether it's teaching undergraduate writing or postgraduate research methods course, to what extent would you encourage your students to experiment with AI, given all of that you have shared about disclosing our interaction with AI while still maintaining human agency in this process? Thank you.
I would definitely encourage students to experiment with it. I think it's really important to learn what it can do, how it works, what kind of output it's generating. I play with it all the time. I'm always not, and I don't really use it in my writing a lot. I really don't. But I've definitely had dialogues with it on various research topics. And I'm very interested in to see how it works. So and sometimes, it will suggest I've used it to get references that um, I wasn't aware of in other ways. I've looked at sometimes the way AI organizes arguments. It's pretty a lot of more sophisticated AIs are very good at that. Um, so yeah, I would encourage students to work to play with it, but recognize that it's like anything else, it's a tool, you know,
Mm,
to help you. And at the end of the day, if you want to get better as a student, um, you will you will develop your own thinking, your own intellect, and not be relying on tools to do it for you. Um,
Right. I also like this semester, I tried to get my students to really play with that like throughout the writing process. And I have
yeah,
noticed that it gets really messy, like what Luke mentioned earlier when it comes to idea generation and looking up articles for the literature review process. I found that when I allowed the students to use it, they really leaned into it and it gets really messy. I also asked them to disclose, like make everything very transparent, and their disclosure statement became like very, very long document. So I was wondering, like, okay, when it comes to an education perspective, like how would that work, and what would be like the ideal model, or like one of the more effective models or meaningful models that we can adopt?
good question. I don't really know. Um, uh, I think it might be like depending on the class,
Hmm.
exactly what you're doing in the class, right? So I could imagine you teaching a class where you as an instructor say, I don't really care about the details of your disclosure here. It's a class in experimental writing and learning how to write. And part of the dialogue with the AI is part of what we're teaching, right? So in a situation like that, disclosure would get extremely tedious, as you said. So I don't really care about that so much. What I
Hmm.
care about is, that there's this understanding you're using it. But in another kind of a class, let's say you're supervising a PhD thesis, okay, where that is a very different kind of a goal of the class, right? Of the learning experience. It is when you're doing a PhD, you really are learning how to become an independent researcher, right? That's the whole point, right? And so for something like that, that shouldn't be just like this playful dialogue with an AI. It
Right.
it should be more of a rigorous disclosure, I
Mhm.
think. But these are, I'm just brainstorming with you right now, because I've looked at also you know policies that universities have adopted on AI, and a lot of them are saying very general things like you must be aware of our honor code and you must be responsible for AI, but we leave the details of AI use to the instructor. So
Right.
they're giving the instructors freedom depending on what they want to do with the class of how AI is used and disclosed and all that.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing with me your thoughts. Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So if no more questions, I think we can wrap up today's event. I think it's really thought-provoking, and thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. We hope this will inspire everyone to reflect on how AI disclosure practices may develop in our own fields. Thank you so much again for joining us, and please keep an eye on our social media uh, and newsletters for upcoming events. And thank you so much again, David.
You're welcome.
It's really nice talking to you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
Thank you.
morning, afternoon, or evening, as the case may be.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.